And I think the number is in the close to 5,000 people. And they went to obituaries, they went to all sorts of methods to come up with an accurate number, and a minimum is close to about 5,000 voters.
A minimum of 5,000, quite a round number, dead people voted. So about those 5,000 dead people, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution writes this, quote, election investigators found just 4 absentee ballots in the 2020 presidential election from voters who had died. All of them returned by relatives. And one of them was a vote for Donald Trump.
Oh, I mean, 2/3 of Republicans believe that the election was stolen, and there's no amount of convincing them otherwise. And I think while it's important for us to continue to tell the story and to continue to debunk the lie, I'm not really sure who we're talking to anymore. You look at Georgia, Trump's claim of 5,000 dead people casting ballots when it turns out that there were 4 ballots turned in for people who died. I mean, there's this massive gap between the truth and the lie. And there seems nothing, though, that can convince at least a mainstay of those voters otherwise.
Matt, I wonder what you make of the, really kind of quiet investigation in that state, looking at all of the president's conduct in Georgia.
I think it's being conducted exactly the way it's supposed to be. These investigations aren't supposed to be loud and noisy. You're supposed to do them as quietly as possible. I do think the bar is going to be very high for a prosecution. I think it's going to be tough to show that the then President Trump had criminal intent when he made that call to the Secretary of State. And I say that because it's not just, you would have to show that he knew he knew he did not win the election and was trying to overturn that. And look, I think that's very much the case. I think he obviously knew he lost and was breaking the law, but he would be able to present a defense where he'd bring in, Sidney Powell, who came to him and told him, all of these fraudulent votes were cast. Rudy Giuliani came and told him the same thing. All of these, quacks and weirdos who were around him making these drummed up claims. And you'd be able to say, I very much did believe that the election was stolen. Look, you saw me saying it publicly all the time. It's the same thing I said privately as what I said publicly. So I do think the eventual bar is going to be high. But again, to something you said earlier about the January 6th committee, we don't know what we don't know. We know this one phone call that was released. We don't know what other evidence the prosecutors have found because, as we started, they're doing their job quietly as they're supposed to do.
Jonathan, I'm thinking about, Donna always makes me think, but I'm thinking about her comment, I don't know who we're talking to anymore. The lie is right now the jet fuel behind 430 voter suppression and voter nullification laws winding their way through 48 states. And so I guess who we're talking to are businesses in those states, fair-minded voters and politicians in those states, and maybe Democratic senators in Washington who have the power to pass federal voting rights legislation. But the truth is, the lie was also told by Mark Meadows. Let me show you what he had to say about dead people voting in Georgia.
You said there was only 2 dead people that would vote. I can promise you there are more than that. And that may be what your investigation shows, but I can promise you there are more than that. But at the same time, I think it's important that we go ahead and move expeditiously to try to do this and resolve it as quickly as we possibly can.
So there were more than 2. There were 4. One of them was a Trump vote. But the ease with which the White House Chief of Staff, and we just heard from Ron Klain, he's on the front lines trying to protect the country from COVID. There you had Mark Meadows on the front lines fraudulently trying to overturn a more than 12,000 vote loss in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, Mark Meadows, fact check true.
I'm sorry, let me get Jonathan in.
I was certainly saying Mark Meadows is right in this case, that there was 4 is more than 2 in terms of dead people who voted, but certainly not be 5,000 or so that then President Trump claimed. In terms of the audience, you make a good point here. It's a small one. We know that the idea of whether or not Joe Biden was legitimately elected is almost a litmus test in the Republican Party now. And if you say yes, you're not a true Republican. In at least most states, it seems that way. There are, of course, some Republicans who still defy that, who seem to abide by the rule of law, but it's a shrinking group. Business groups is another yes, where that would be an audience for this, to put pressure on. We saw what happened in Georgia when business groups really balked against the move to restrict voting access there. And I guess, though, that perhaps the group of all is that thin slice of independents, those voters who go in every 4 years predisposed to be undecided. Those who broke significantly for Joe Biden in 2020, who at least to some degree went for Donald Trump in 2016. They'll make the difference most likely in the election in 2024. They'll play a big role in 2022 as well, though midterms are far more about base turnout than the undecideds. That's who the audience is, and that's why so many Democrats and those few Republicans who do believe in this say it's worth telling the story over and over, both in interviews, both in TV shows like this, and of course through the work of the January 6th Committee.
Donna, I'm coming back to you for the last word.
Well, I think even for Republicans who know the difference and who know that Joe Biden legitimately won the election, especially in Congress, so many of them are driven by whether or not they're going to get a primary challenge. And for them, that primary race is the race. And it is, I mean, it would be sacrilege for them to say that Joe Biden was not duly elected. And I think that for those Republicans, they're going to just dig in because they're concerned about challenges coming from the right. And so there's no changing that base, but there's also no changing, I think, those Republican elected leaders who are afraid of losing office.
We're going to dig around a little bit, too, and try to see if we can figure out where 5,000 dead people came from, even in the imagination of the nutty ex-president. Switching gears a little bit, Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn has become one of the very public faces of January 6th, and he wants to make sure there will be more hearings into that day for all to witness. His powerful words on why are next.